All right, this is Brian O'Driscoll, upcoming on Off the Ball. In this piece, we get into lots of chat about Eddie Jones and his England departure, and there's lots more on the full piece as well. In the full podcast, he'll talk about Warren Gatland, he'll talk about Ronan O'Gara, he'll talk about the Heineken Cup restarting this weekend, and lots more as well. Besides, and to check that out, just find OTB Rugby in whatever feed it is that you check out your podcasts in. Sit back, relax, and enjoy it. Paul Bennett on YouTube here, one of our YouTube commenters, sent in a good question, which is right decision, wrong time in relation to Eddie Jones. And I'm sure he had that meeting on Monday. I'm sure he was making that point. Lads, this is a bad decision. Keep going. I taper into World Cups. This is what I do. You're making the wrong call. We'll never ultimately know. But what's your sense of whether, about that one, sort of right decision, wrong time?
All you can work on is murmurings and what you hear. And I think there's, in any organisation, irrespective of sport or business or anything, I think if retention is a huge thing, the enjoyment of individuals staying there and wanting to be in an environment, that if you look at the turnover of coaches alone, I think for me that's alarm bells, that they couldn't stay the course, that they couldn't stay with Eddie because the asks were too much, or the environment to create, the space that they were working in wasn't enjoyable. And ultimately that's what we're all looking for, is for, you get enjoyment in your family life, hopefully, and you want to go in and not have to check in, check out on at work. Whereas it felt as though in some of those cases that, there were ultimatums put to certain individuals, that they were, bullying is probably on the harsh side, but definitely pushed to a bit of their collar from a work capacity. You heard rumours of him calling in the middle of the night and the expectation of answering calls. I had heard that Steve Borthwick had been getting calls down in the Lions Tour in 2017 when England were on tour with Argentina, and Eddie was asking him about certain line-out plays, about what they should do at the weekend. And I think that's an unrealistic expectation, but also it's just testing. And what are you doing for actually growing relationships with some of your core workforce around you and doing those things? And I think you'll find over the course of the next 6 months that truths will start to leak out when players do interviews, and some will be loyal to Eddie and others will be very relieved that it's over. And I'm sure lots of players that are on the periphery, you'll hear some pretty outspoken views as to what they thought when they were in camp, and how enjoyment wasn't high on some of their on their spectrums, because it just wasn't an environment that was kind of conducive to playing their best rugby. And I think you have to also look at what the Gallagher Premiership has delivered in the last 2 years. It's a really good league now. I've been calling some games, and for years they kind of blew their own trumpet a small bit, maybe before its time. And then I have to say, in more recent times, there's no doubt that it's a very, very high standard league. Some great rugby. And when that doesn't convert across to international, you've got to start scratching your head a little bit and ask the questions why that is the case. Yeah. So I personally think that it's a good move because it felt as though I think there's an opportunity to save it. Do I think England are going to win the World Cup? They can, because they're still England. They can get it together. They've got a lot of players to pick from. But I think it was unlikely with Eddie, and it's probably still unlikely with Steve Borthwick or anyone else. But it's still England. They can still, if you can get to a semi-final, you can get to a final, and England can get to semi-finals for sure.
I heard Ellis Genge on The Good, the Bad and the Rugby last week, and he was asked about that point that you were just making there about the mood in the camp, the old mood in the camp question, and he was like, no, I mean, everything seems fine. I'm certainly not hearing this stuff that you're talking about, which what the hell else was he going to say? The man was still in the job, he's still playing for England.
Like you have to put your best foot forward. You can never be seen to be the ones that are. And in the cases where you're outspoken, you're gone from Eddie's squad. Yeah. There's players with previous on that. Danny Kerr is a good example of that, where he said some things that didn't land or register well with Eddie, and he was pretty much on the outside, and arguably he's probably been England's best scrum half over the course of the last couple of seasons. I remember look back to an incident in 2004 where we knew that Gary Ella wasn't the coach for us. And, the board of management at Leinster, we kind of got the sense that they wanted us to do the dirty work for them, and say that, there was a lack of confidence or no vote of no confidence in Gary, but we were like, that's not our job. That's not our job. You just have to back the coach. And that's the responsibility of board members in that environment to realize that that's the case and they make the tough call. Whereas we were like, no, everything's fine. Let's keep going. Everything's grand. And so you will continue to always hear that as long as a coach is still in a gig, still relevant to your selection and whatnot. But I do believe that you will find over the course of time, when there's more separation, that you'll get more home truths as to what was actually going on. And maybe it seems extra dramatic that with the way I'm talking, but I kind of feel as though it's in the offing.
Were you obviously there's the famous Gatland Eddie stuff, and you were very young in your career at that point. But was there any other point down the track where the suits came knocking, Leinster or Ireland, and said, "Listen, when the brown stuff was hitting the fan at any point, which it can do, what's your view on where we're going with this?"
You got to explain that to me a little bit more. What do you mean, suits coming to me personally?
Yes, exactly. Or in your role as a captain or like senior players.
No, I think it's always done. It's nearly always done through a coaching staff. They wouldn't. What's the benefit of them coming directly to you? Because as well, then from an individual point of view, in my case, if someone comes directly to me, the last thing they want to be is outed as coming directly to you and putting undue pressure, unnecessary pressure on you as a player that's just one of a number. So no, there wasn't. It was always as a unit. And going back, I wasn't captain of Leinster back in 2004. Reggie Corrigan was, but I remember having team meetings and coming to decision going, we're not the ones that are going to be making any call here. Yeah. It's our responsibility to dig in and just say, no, the coach has our backing. But yet, publicly that was, but then privately, I'm sure, we were able to go and say, listen, this doesn't look as though it's going anywhere, and maybe we are looking for a change. But there was no way publicly we were going to go, we should move on. We just lost Matt Williams the year before. We'd had these number of years of kind of capitulating at key times, and we didn't have any position of strength to make a call like that anyway. So you have to know your place as well, and you have to know the timing of where the perception of you is as a team. And it'd be interesting to see what guys like, I'd imagine guys like Owen Farrell, who he put an awful lot of time and faith into, will say nothing, because that's the sort of guy that Owen Farrell is as well. But there'll be other characters that definitely felt a little bit hard done by, that now will find themselves making more England squad. Guys like Ben Earl, right, who's been playing brilliantly for Saracens but can't get into the England squad. It kind of, you scratch your head a little bit around those sort of selections. So guys like him, or even Ellis Genge, who doesn't seem to have much of a filter in what he says, and that's why he's interesting to listen to. Will he ultimately come out and say, I didn't have an awful lot of fun?
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. And also, just on the overall point around that, it's sort of a slightly weird question. If you're asking the players, you sort of know the answer anyway, I guess would be the point around that. What's your sense of where Eddie goes?
You do, but you want confirmation in it, Adrian, at the same time. Like we're all the same. Like here, I'm talking about what I think, but I don't know for sure. Again, you talk about murmurings, rumours, but you want hard facts. And the only ones you get that from is the players, those that have been there and in the environment. And then you can absolutely clarify what your original thoughts were on something versus speculation around, what a perception is of an environment.
What's your sense where Eddie goes from here? There's already rumours this afternoon that he's been linked with some sort of consultancy role with Cast. I don't know what the non-compete situation with his England
stuff
is.
I don't think there is one. I don't think, I saw something else saying that it doesn't look as though there's much of a non-compete in whatever severance package that he he managed to procure. But I haven't seen, that's only been, listen, I saw that on a Instagram site or one of the rugby sites. So I wouldn't necessarily say that's gospel, but I don't know where Eddie goes from here. I think, consultancies, I would imagine as a consultant, he could probably be very good, be very effective. I just think the other thing that people haven't really talked about, 7 years is an awful long time to stay in an international gig. We had a similar situation with Joe, and it didn't pan out the way we wanted in 2019. Very hard to come up with multiple different ways to play the game as an international coach, because teams work you out a little bit more internationally than they do at club, and you have to have a continual evolution. And so if you are playing a similar style over a long period of time, it's I don't think it's going to necessarily end well. There's not too many coaches. Even Steve Hansen, who had huge success with being assistant coach in 2011 and then winning in 2015 and then in 2019, not to say that it unraveled, but they didn't go and win the World Cup when they were hotly tipped to as well. So it's very hard for coaches in the long term to continually land on the markers of expectation, particularly in countries like South Africa, New Zealand, England.
All right, that was Brian O'Driscoll in conversation in relation to Eddie Jones, specifically in his departure from England and exactly what's to come for them over the next 12 months or so. And you can check out more of Brian's thoughts. He'll talk about Warren Gatland, Ronan O'Gara, Scott Robertson to Leinster, as well as the return, obviously, of the Heineken Cup as well this weekend. So lots more on all of that. And to pick all of that up, just click on this link here for the full podcast.